It smells of lime, cold ashes, and warm water from overturned buckets. Signs prohibiting gatherings are plastered at intersections. Shops are locked, bells toll for the dead, and adult men and women are leaving Florence, taking their trunks with them to places where the air is drier and quieter. They are called fugitives, but there is order in their routine: bread, fire, and strictly measured hours for storytelling, as if it were another sanitary regulation to keep their minds intact while the city sinks into the abyss. Hello. Please write in the comments which city and country you are watching from. I wish you peaceful but attentive listening. What follows is a dry chronicle of how texts, indexes, and seals broke myths down into details and turned laughter into a controllable tool. In Florence in the year 1348, there are mortality registers, delayed confessions, and orders to move funerals outside the city walls. Against this backdrop, a series of short stories is born, where desire is not wild freedom, but part of urban arithmetic. Here, marriage settlements are recorded by a notary, dowries are valued as capital of reputation, oaths seal deals, and the body becomes a lever of status and a bargaining chip between name and profit. Laughter is aimed not at the sacred, but at the mask, at the falsehood of the clergy, at the pretense of piety, at the price of words. The myth of plague pornography likes to pick out spicy episodes. The document lying in the office responds with a list of debts, marriage contracts, and fines for violating isolation. Handwritten notebooks are scattered around homes and cells. In the margins, next to ingenious plots, are notes about payment deadlines, guardianship of widows, and risks to one's reputation. The city records the practical. Statutes prohibit large meals, taverns turn off their lights early, and parishes warn of punishment for reading funny stories aloud. This is not a hunt for flesh. It is fear of the crowd, where laughter erodes discipline in a year of famine and debt. Thus, the first crack appears between myth and paper. The legend depicts debauchery on bones, while the paper shows social satire and a moral experiment on the role of rank, purse, and tongue. The first printed scissors are still ahead, but their shadow is already visible. By the end of the 15th century, Venice and the Tuscan cities are teaching typographers to sign, keep font samples, and submit sheets to inspectors. Shops require permission to sell. In the following century, under Popes Paul IV and Pius IV, the indexes will introduce the formulas corrected and with permission, and the ducal Florence will turn Tuscan prose into a model of language under quiet supervision. However, even before these seals, it is clear where the line will be drawn. Public voices will be silenced, but private memories will not. Clerics will retell episodes as examples of pride and greed, merchants as cautionary tales of risk, and women from houses with heavy dowry chests as safety instructions for the sake of reputation. This is how the next turns are prepared. First, the knife of censorship, then the whisper of quotations, then the compromise for scholars and not allowed, and all this against the backdrop of the same lime and the same accounting of death, where desire is a variable of calculation, not a poster for the crowd. Handwritten notebooks leave country rooms for city cabinets on chains, and with them goes the skill of keeping anxiety under control. The copyists, adults with tired eyes, mark not the juicy details in the margins, but the calculations, where the dowry became collateral, where the oath turned into a trap, where the office covered up crude bargaining. In city inventories, alongside theology, there are entries about access to folk prose for scholars, and in penalty books, a new line is recorded for reading aloud outside of permitted gatherings. The document shows not a struggle against sensuality, but a fear of a noisy crowd that in a year of famine easily mistakes laughter for permission to spit on order. Therefore, taverns extinguish their lights earlier. evening funny stories are prohibited, and parishes remind people that public speech is now considered a health risk. By the end of the 15th century, Venetian and Tuscan workshops put names and dates on the title page, kept font samples, and submitted sheets for verification. Printing became as meticulous as salt storage. Didactic works, legal treatises, and stories about deals and deception stand side by side in the display window. The market does not care what the sheet carries, as long as it has a duty stamp and a seal. The supervisor has a table in his pocket, confiscation for anonymous printing, a season without a press for unauthorized printing, a fine in favor of infirmaries for reading aloud. This boring arithmetic is easier to remember than lectures. Further along the curve is the first big turn. In Rome, in the year 1559, a strict list of banned books is compiled, and in the year 1564, after concilia decisions, a softened but unified scheme is proposed. Do not print, do not sell, do not store without permission, and for some, correct and allow. In ducal Florence, the authorities, who valued order and the Tuscan language, commissioned a learned cleric to prepare a censored edition, to remove direct attacks on the clergy, to tone down coarse expressions, and to preserve the essence of the deal, status, and speech. The words corrected and with permission appear on the title page. The language is returned to the bench, but the knife marks remain in the margins. At the same time, access is formalized. In university catalogs, the title is marked for scholars. In monastery cabinets, the book hangs on a chain, and the librarian keeps a log of who took it and when it was returned. Public reading in taverns is prohibited, but lectures on rhetoric are held according to schedule, where episodes are analyzed as cases of speech, law, and trade. Laughter is banned from public spaces, but remains in classrooms as a tool for recognizing masks. The myth sees this as a retreat from debauchery, but the document records a different meaning: the transfer of material from street noise to educational silence. No bonfires, no spectacles. Instead, there are routine, physically tangible consequences. A printer caught with a free sheet loses his press for the season and pays for linen and oil for the infirmaries. A typesetter goes to forced labor. A shopkeeper closes his shutters until the audit. Abuse of power also occurs. An influential house tries to seize a batch under the guise of purification in order to stifle a rival. The council notes the commercial motive, orders the books to be returned after marking, and obliges the culprits to pay for the repair of the chimneys of public ovens. On paper, it looks dry. In life, it looks like blue soot on your fingers and a sore back. Meanwhile, private memory quietly survives any censorship. Adult clerics retell episodes in sermons as examples of pride and greed, without naming the author. Teachers use them to practice argumentation. Notaries teach students to see where ambiguity is hidden in a contract. Merchants use them to assess risk. Women from houses with heavy dowry chests keep handwritten excerpts as safety instructions for the sake of appearances. Demand witnesses, ask for a notary, recognize pressure disguised as authority. This is how the second quiet turn takes shape. The book loses its loudness, but gains practical power. All this takes place against the backdrop of the same lime on the walls and the same mortality columns in parish registers. The memory of the plague makes talk of the body businesslike. Guild statutes specify rules for widows and remarriage. Marriage offices recalculate dowries. Charity houses describe how to divide the property of the deceased without heirs. And when another pamphlet declares stories to be plague pornography, catalogs with access notes, shop licenses, inspectors' journals, and infirmary estimates are already lying nearby. These dry sheets once again triumph over the clamor. Laughter remains where it is useful to the city, and prohibition remains where it preserves silence. In ducal Florence, compromise is elevated to a craft. The words "corrected" and "with permission" appear on title pages, and printing houses keep font samples and sheets with watermarks so that the inspector can verify the origin of the print run. The chancellery at the court of Cosimo de' Medici keeps language as a sign of order. Popular prose is allowed, but strictly castigated. The full text is kept in university and monastery cabinets on chains with the note "for scholars." Public reading in taverns is prohibited, but the department's schedules are filled with rhetoric courses, where the plot is analyzed as a case study of transaction and status. The records show that fines for reading aloud were used to pay for linen and oil for hospitals, and duties on cleansed publications were used to pay inspectors' salaries. There is no theater here, only accounting control. Supervision works by weight, not by shouting. A printer caught with an unauthorized sheet loses his press for the season and carries wood for public stoves. A typesetter pulls stones at a construction site, his palms cracking. A shopkeeper closes his shutters until the next audit. There are attempts to abuse power. An influential house buys up a batch under the guise of cleansing in order to stifle a rival. The council notes the commercial motive, orders the books to be returned after marking, and obliges the culprits to pay for the repair of the chimneys. The parish accounts contain bare figures that reveal no passions, but it is clear that books are as integral to the economy as salt and wood. Meanwhile, the memories of adult readers slip away from the scissors. Clergymen transfer episodes into sermons as warnings against pride and greed, without naming the author. Notaries give students scenes as exercises in recognizing ambiguities in contracts. Merchants practice calculation on novella-like cases. Women in houses with heavy dowry chests keep handwritten excerpts as safety instructions for the name. Where to demand witnesses, when to turn to a notary, how to recognize pressure disguised as authority. Thus, the ban turns into a filter of usefulness. Noise is cut off. Educational material is preserved. The Roman Index under Paul IV and its revision under Pius IV put local practices into a common framework. Do not print or sell without permission. For some, correct and allow. Full access only for scholars. Universities are the first to adapt. They need exemplary Tuscan prose, and they take it with knife cuts as long as it remains in the textbook. On the catalog cards, next to the title, they put the date of verification and the librarian's signature. In the access journals, who took it and for which course. The stricter the area, the quieter and deeper the office. In this silence, laughter changes its function. It no longer entertains the crowd. It disarms the role-playing scenery, where rank covers profit and words cover deception. This is precisely why the myth of pornography of the plague does not hold here. Next to every whisper of scandal lies a document, a license, a correction, a catalog, a penalty book. And this set of papers explains why the book was not burned, but incorporated into the discipline of language and calculation. By the middle of the new century, the compromise is working, but it is cracking under seasonal waves of anxiety. As soon as bread prices rise and the plague returns, posters against indecent laughter appear in the square. The statutes of bookstores increase the penalty for reading aloud, and inspectors make more frequent visits, checking watermarks and font sizes. Printing houses live in cycles. A week of typesetting, a week of checks, then silence for the season if a free sheet is caught. These pauses add up to the city's physical payment for order. The typesetter rubs his fingers raw on stone during forced labor. The shopkeeper freezes behind closed shutters until the audit, and the librarian writes the same signatures in the access log until his hand goes numb. The document does not scold. It states, "The fine went to the infirmary. The machine will remain sealed until such and such a date. Access to the full edition is confirmed by the signature of the custodian. Through this heaviness, something breaks through that the band cannot turn off. Memory. Adult clerics use episodes as warnings against pride and greed without mentioning the author. Rhetoric teachers give them as examples of speech and status. Notaries analyze in class the places where the contract breaks down due to ambiguity. Merchants dispel risk with familiar schemes. Housewives with heavy dowry chests keep handwritten excerpts as safety instructions for their names. Demand witnesses, call a notary. Do not trust pressure disguised as authority. This creates a delicate balance. The book is silent in public, but speaks in offices and at kitchen tables where expenses are calculated. At the same time, the authorities are trying to close another loophole: prestige. In library catalogs, the words "for scholars" are added next to the title, and universities are expanding their courses on the analysis of folk prose so that laughter dissolves into grammar and does not gather a crowd. The complete editions are chained up. The cleansed ones are displayed in shop windows, and 2 formulas are mandatory on the title page about correction and permission. Cases of abuse still surface. An influential house buys up a batch under the guise of cleansing in order to squeeze out a competitor. The council records the commercial motive and sends the confiscated stack back to the shops after labeling, imposing the costs of repairing public chimneys on the initiators. There is no drama in these decisions, but there is a clear signal. The authorities are not interested in other people's imagination, but in market discipline and quiet streets. Meanwhile, the myth persists. Brochures appear, promising to expose pornography of morals, and leaflets with pictures that skillfully mix innuendo and panic. Their life is short. Nearby lie access catalogs, inspectors' journals, marriage records with reduced dowries, infirmary estimates, replenished with fines for reading aloud. These neighborhoods work like cold water. Laughter in short stories exposes the role-playing scenery, not holiness. The body in stories is a lever of risk for the name, not a spectacle for the square. Therefore, no matter how much the administrative machine tries to bypass it, it invariably leaves that very narrow door. For scholars, not allowed, under lock and key with a signature. Through it passes the main thing, the skill of discerning the weaknesses of status, speech, and deals, without which the city would go blind faster than from the smoke in a chimney. In the end, the city is left not with a sensation, but with an established regime. The book is arranged on shelves according to function, cleansed, in a bench under seal, complete, on a chain marked "for scholars" and an access log. Public reading is prohibited, and office discussions are scheduled by the hour. Inspectors walk the aisles, check watermarks, take font samples, and record batches. From the fines, infirmaries receive flax and oil, and printing houses receive the right to return to the press after a season of downtime. Church administrators maintain boundaries. The stories are used in sermons as warnings against pride and greed, without mentioning the author. In theological schools, the book is used as material for analyzing the temptations of status and language. Civil authorities collect duties and hold the keys to the cupboards. Order costs money and silence, and both currencies are more expensive than rhetoric. In everyday life, this seems mundane. Adult readers do not go to the square, but to the office. They take a cleaned volume to practice speech, or ask for access to the full version for analysis of rhetoric and law. Notaries teach how to see where a contract falls apart under the weight of ambiguity. Merchants drive out risk with recognizable schemes. Clergy practice distinguishing between the mask of office and real responsibility. Women, who guard the honor of houses with heavy dowry chests, keep short summaries as a safety technique for their name. Demand witnesses, call a notary. Do not believe pressure covered by pious words. Desire ceases to be a poster. It becomes a variable in the calculation of reputation and property. Death does not go away. It is counted in parish columns and seen in quarantine decrees. It is precisely because of its proximity that speech becomes businesslike rather than picturesque. The myth of plague pornography is still trying to make a comeback, in brochures and leaflets with alarming pictures, but next to them lie indexes with reservations about corrections, catalogs with admissions, book series statutes, inspectors' journals, marriage records with altered dowry amounts, infirmary estimates, supplemented with fines for reading aloud. These dry papers oppose the cry better than any bonfires. They show that the laughter in the novellas does not strike at the sacred, but at the role-playing scenery, where rank covers profit and words cover deception. That is why the book was not destroyed or turned into a universal talisman. It was built into the discipline of language, the market, and memory. The choice was made by human hands. The scribe preferred printing to the stake. The ruler preferred licenses to punitive outbursts. The cleric preferred didactics to loud prohibitions. The printer preferred a censored version to the loss of the press. The reader preferred analysis to noisy sensation. The result is neither solemn nor gloomy, but stable. Reading is allowed. Seducing the crowd is not. Storing, under lock and key. Discussing, in the auditorium. Quoting, as a tool. The last frame shows not a bonfire or a feast, but a locked cabinet, an access card in a catalog, and a table with a lamp, where adults quietly untangle a knot of speech, status, and deal. The young men and women once left Florence to survive. Their schedule of stories became the language in which the city learned to talk about desire alongside death, without hysteria and without masks. This is the honest denouement. Myth has given way to documentation, and the book remains as a cold but reliable way to keep one's head above water.